Hi, everybody. It is 2 o'clock. So let's get started. Can everyone from CalRecycle who's going to speak or answer questions turn on your webcam? Perfect. Kristen, do you have your webcam working? Awesome. Thank you guys so much. So hi all and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the Procurement Calculator webinar. This is a statewide webinar where our procurement team is going to discuss the calculator that they helped build and answer any questions that you guys have on using the calculator. So my name is Ashley Yee. I'm CalRecycle's SB 1383 Implementation Manager. And before I turn it over to Michelle Dewey, I wanted to introduce to you all who will be presenting and are available to respond to any questions. So from CalRecycle, and if you just want to wave CalRecycle or nod or whatever. So from CalRecycle, we have Scott Beckner, Michelle Dewey, and Kristen Pidcock representing procurement. We have Kara Morgan, who's representing local assistance, collections, and all the other articles that she's worked on. But for here, she's going to mainly talk about local assistance as needed. We have Alan Ilazorio and Trisha Moore representing compliance and enforcement. They're also the leads for record keeping. So if there are any record keeping questions, and they are developing another tool for record keeping, but they are the leads for the record keeping team that we have here at CalRecycle. And we have Julia Doloff and Sarah Khalid who will be helping with the Q&A portion. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And I'm going to turn over to Michelle Dewey to go over some logistics and start the presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ashley. All right. And Julia Doloff is our master presentation manager today. So thank you, Julia. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. Before we do kick off our presentation today, I do want to cover a few logistics and some background. If you are joining today through CalRecycle's broadcast and would like to switch over to GoToWebinar, you'll see on this slide the SLCP inbox email. So you may email CalRecycle at that email to get a link to join through GoToWebinar. You may join today through either platform and we'll be able to fully engage in the Q&A session today through either format, but through GoToWebinar, you will have the option of also viewing the written Q&A box if that is of interest to you. So a heads up on that. Today, I will be giving you a presentation on CalRecycle's SB 1383 Procurement Calculator Tool. This is an optional tool that has been developed to help cities and counties in California to meet the recovered organic waste product procurement requirements outlined in Article 12 of the SB 1383 regulations. This tool may be helpful to jurisdictions in multiple ways. It can help a jurisdiction to plan for their procurement in that they can calculate their procurement target and the quantities of recovered organic waste products they'll need to procure to meet this target. This tool may be helpful to jurisdictions in tracking their actual progress towards meeting their procurement goals, and it may be helpful to organize some of the details important for record keeping and for reporting. Please note, however, that this is not a record keeping or reporting tool, as there are additional requirements and documentation necessary for the record keeping requirements that are not captured in this tool. And I'll go into a little bit more detail on that later in this presentation. Today's presentation will be focusing on the use of this tool. It will briefly touch upon the procurement requirements. However, for a greater overview of the procurement requirements, we do encourage you to check out our website, where you may find FAQs and additional resources on procurement. And we also encourage you to attend our upcoming regional webinars, which will include a presentation on procurement and a Q&A session. The next one is being hosted tomorrow from 1 to 4 p.m. So please feel free to reach out to the SLCP inbox to register for tomorrow or any of the other upcoming webinars. And if you are unable to attend these, they will be recorded and posted on our website. Next slide, please. Today's presentation will cover the different tabs of the Procurement Calculator tool and will showcase an example jurisdiction to show how a jurisdiction may use this tool. My slideshow today will primarily consist of screenshots from this tool, and as some of these screenshots are a little bit text heavy, such as the Readme tab, which has a lot of instructions on using the tool, I would recommend that you primarily listen into today's presentation, but to try not to read too much text on our slides. And throughout my presentation today and during the Q&A session, please feel free to submit any questions you have. If you are joining through the GoToWebinar, you may submit these through the question feature. And if you are joining through CalRecycle's broadcast, you may submit these through our SLCP inbox listed here. We'll be sure to read aloud all questions and answers, so folks joining through either platform will be able to hear all questions and responses. Additionally, we do have CalRecycle staff on the line that will ask you to unmute yourself during the Q&A session to ask your questions, and we will try and answer questions on a first come, first served basis, getting to as many different people as possible. And if we are unable to answer your question during today's webinar, we will be following up with you. And again, we do ask that questions focus on our Procurement Calculator tool. And lastly, today's presentation will be recorded and posted online for your future reference. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. So let's get started. The first tab of the calculator tool is the Readme tab. Next slide. This tab starts off with a brief introduction of the SB 1383 regulations and the procurement requirements. It also includes an introduction of the tool and how to best use it. As described in here, there are two parts to the procurement requirements. The first part is for the procurement of recycled content paper. This requires the paper purchases are recyclable and have recycled content. However, this is a blanket requirement across all paper purchases and does not require a certain quantity of paper products to be procured. Therefore, this is separate from the procurement calculator tool that we'll discuss today. The second part of the procurement requirements are for the procurement of recovered organic waste products. This requires that a certain quantity of these products are procured. And so this is the focus of our calculator tool. Next slide. Further along in the Readme tab, there is a disclaimer which should be kept in mind when using this tool. We also include the SLCP inbox email, which users may use to contact CalRecycle with any questions on the use of this tool. This section also introduces our color key that is used throughout the calculator tool. It notes which cells can be edited in yellow and which cells cannot, which are in green. Those that cannot be edited are informational or hold formulas and are not meant for data entry. The Readme tab then goes through instructions that will guide the user through each tab and through each step of using this tool. Next slide, please. So the next tab of the calculator tool is the Procurement Target and Planning tab. This tab is where users can calculate their procurement target and the quantities of recovered organic waste products they'll need to procure to meet this target. This planning tab is essentially scratch paper, and where users can start to crunch the numbers and begin planning their strategy to meet their procurement target. Next slide. So the first step for the Procurement Calculator tool is shown here. You can see that the Readme tab shown at the top of this slide includes instructions that guides users through the use of each section of this tool. So here, these instructions correlate with step 1 of the Procurement Target and Planning tab and directs users to enter the jurisdiction's name and reporting year. So for today's presentation, we will have an example jurisdiction titled Example City and the reporting year of 2022, which is the first year of compliance. So you'll see here in our yellow data entry cells that we have included that information. Next slide, please. The next step, as guided through the Readme tab, is step 2, and this instructs users on determining the jurisdiction's procurement target. There are two options included in the calculator tool for the user to determine their procurement target. Option 1 is shown here and allows users to calculate their procurement target. This uses the formula outlined in the regulations in which the jurisdiction's population is multiplied by a per capita procurement factor of 0.08 tons of organic waste per person per year, and this results in the jurisdiction's procurement target. So in order to calculate the jurisdiction's procurement target, they may find their population estimate from the California Department of Finance's website linked here. So for our example jurisdiction, they have a population of 100,000 residents, therefore their calculated procurement target is 8,000 tons of organic waste. Note, however, that at this time, this calculation will be an estimate of the jurisdiction's procurement target, as their official procurement target for 2022 will be taking into account newer population data than is currently available by the Department of Finance. We expect this population to be available in May of this year, and CalRecycle will be providing notice to jurisdiction of their official targets following the release of this data. Next slide. The second option, as guided through the Readme tab, allows users to directly enter their procurement target rather than to calculate it. As mentioned, CalRecycle will inform jurisdictions annually of their procurement target through posting on our website and through direct written notification. Therefore, this option may be of interest to jurisdictions when they are informed of these official targets. So you'll see here for our example jurisdiction, rather than calculating their target, they have directly entered this target of 8,000 tons of organic waste. It's important to note also that the procurement target for each jurisdiction will be recalculated every 5 years to account for changes in population. Therefore, the procurement target for the year of 2022 will be in effect for 5 years until 2027. Next slide. The procurement target and planning tab then outlines the conversion factors that are outlined in the regulations and are used to convert the jurisdiction's procurement target into quantities of recovered organic waste products. These are included here for reference to show what conversion factors are used and what recovered organic waste product types are eligible to meet a jurisdiction's procurement target. This tab also includes a table on the bottom shown here, which demonstrates how much a jurisdiction would need to procure if they met 100% of their procurement target through just one product. As a reminder, jurisdictions can customize their procurement and can procure the products that will meet their local needs. So they can meet their target entirely through one product or through a mix of products. So this table will show users off the bat how much a jurisdiction would need to procure if they want to meet their target through just one product. So you'll see here for our example jurisdiction, they would need to procure 168,000 diesel gallon equivalents of transportation fuel if they want to meet their target entirely through transportation fuel. Similarly, our example jurisdiction could meet 100% of their target if they've procured just over 4,600 tons of compost. Next slide, please. However, many jurisdictions may choose to instead procure a mix of products to meet their target and not meet it through just one. So the next step, as guided through the Readme tab, is step 3 and allows users to calculate the quantities of products the jurisdiction would need to procure if they do choose to procure a mix of products. So there's 2 different options included in the tool for the user to make these calculations. The first option, as guided here, directs users to enter the ratio of the product mixes they plan to procure. The user can enter how much of the target they would plan to meet through each product, and this will show how much this would equate to annually. So you'll see here for our example jurisdiction, if they were interested in meeting 20% of their target through mulch, this would amount to 1,600 tons of mulch procured annually. This allows jurisdictions to see precisely how much they would need to be procured annually to meet 100% of their target. And so it can be a good starting place to begin this planning. You'll notice there is a progress bar at the bottom of the screen titled Fulfillment of Procurement Target, and this shows how much of the target would be met with procurement as planned. So you'll notice that the quantities entered in by our example jurisdiction does add up to 100%, and with this as planned, they would fully meet their procurement target. Next slide. The second option, as guided through the Readme tab, directs users to enter the quantity of these products they plan to procure. And then this quantity is translated into percentages to show how much of the target would be met with those procurement quantities. So this may be of interest to jurisdictions who are already procuring these eligible products or may already have an idea as to the quantities they plan to procure annually. You'll see here for our example jurisdiction, if they were interested in procuring 1,600 tons of mulch annually, this would meet 20% of their procurement target. And again, we have our progress bar on the bottom of the screen, which shows how much of the target would be met with that procurement as planned. Next slide. The next tab of the calculator tool is the Procurement Details tab. This tab is where users can get can enter details on the procurement achieved during the compliance year, and where they can begin to organize some of the information helpful for record keeping and reporting. While the previous tab could be useful for developing a plan for procurement, this tab will be useful for tracking a jurisdiction's actual procurement implementation and their progress towards meeting their procurement goals. Next slide. This tab does start off with a reminder to the user that this section is not intended to be the jurisdiction's implementation record, as there are additional documentation and details necessary for the jurisdiction to meet their record-keeping requirements, and these are not all captured in this tool. However, as Ashley mentioned, CalRecycle is currently developing an optional electronic record-keeping tool that will encompass all of the record-keeping requirements and will be a sample electronic record that jurisdictions may choose to use to keep these records and to house their implementation record. So this tab and some of the details kept and organized here could be translated into this jurisdiction's implementation record or could be referenced in that record. Next slide, please. The next step, as guided through the Readme tab, is step 4 and allows users to record these details of the procurement achieved during the compliance year. This may include details such as the type of product procured, how much was procured, details of the entity from whom the product was procured, such as the vendor name, location, or contact information, and details of the product use. These are just some of the important details necessary for the record-keeping requirements that can be organized here. So shown here is an example included in our calculator tool that demonstrates to users what this log of information might look like. Next slide. Following this example in the tool, we then have a section for users to then enter these details for their procurement implementation and their procurement achieved in the compliance year. So as guided in step 4, a jurisdiction can enter in all information included here that will be helpful for their record keeping requirements. You'll notice there is a column titled Other Notes, and this can also be where users may choose to link to electronic documents or invoices and some other important details and information that may be helpful to organize here, and that will be helpful for their record keeping requirements. So you'll see here for our example jurisdiction, these are the quantities that they have hypothetically procured in 2022, and those are some of the various details that went along with those procurement events. Next slide. The next tab of the calculator tool is the Summary tab. This is a read-only tab and does not ask for any data entry by the user. It summarizes and creates a report of all the procurement achieved in the reporting year as entered in that previous Procurement Details tab. So this allows jurisdictions to keep track of the progress they're making towards meeting the procurement targets throughout the year and to see their procurement achieved at year end. Next slide. So this Summary tab begins by restating the jurisdiction's name and reporting year, and then this tab includes a metric that demonstrates the jurisdiction's progress towards achieving their procurement goal. So you'll see this familiar fulfillment of procurement target progress bar, which indicates the progress the jurisdiction has achieved to date in fulfilling its annual procurement target. So you'll see here for our example jurisdiction, they have fulfilled almost 14% of their procurement target to date. And again, this is pulling in those details of procurement entered in the Procurement Details tab. This section of the summary tab also restates the jurisdiction's procurement target and calculates how much of this target has been met and how much remains. Next slide. The summary tab then outlines a couple more summary tables. The first table shown at the top is the total procurement for the reporting year. This shows the total products procured in the reporting year. And again, this is as recorded in that Procurement Details tab. So if the Procurement Details tab is used in full by the jurisdiction, by the user, and if they choose to include all procurement events of their compliance year, then this summarized value of the total quantities procured in the year is what could be reported to CalRecycle to meet a jurisdiction's reporting requirements. And these year-end totals are all that is required for reporting under procurement, unless a jurisdiction will be implementing a reduced procurement target, in which there are a few more reporting requirements. The second table shown here is the monthly procurement for the reporting year. And this table summarizes the total products procured in each month of the reporting year. And again, as pulling in those details from the Procurement Details tab. And this allows a side-by-side comparison across each month of the compliance year. Next slide. Lastly, the summary tab includes one final table titled Monthly Procurement Progress for the reporting year. And this shows how much of the procurement target was met through each month in the reporting year. This may be a helpful tool to jurisdictions in their subsequent reporting years, and may be helpful to help them stay on track towards meeting their goals. They could use this to compare their historical monthly procurement achievements with their current procurement progress. So some of these summary tools can be used to help a jurisdiction not just in their current compliance year, but in their future compliance years, and to stay on track. Next slide. And the last tab of the calculator tool is the Definitions tab. And this tab is a little self-explanatory, but it does provide definitions for the terms and initialisms used in the document. And it does heavily reference these regulatory definitions for these terms. It is an important reminder to users to ensure that the products they're procuring do indeed meet the requirements and the definitions outlined in the regulations. So I encourage you to look towards this tab as well. Next slide. So that's it for my presentation today. Please be sure you are signed up for our SLCP listserv if you are not already, where we do announce future webinars and release of tools. As a reminder, this presentation is being recorded today and will be posted on our website for future education. And please do check out our website and attend those upcoming regional webinars if you would like more information on the procurement requirements themselves. And feel free to contact us with any questions at the SLCP inbox listed here. And thank you so much for listening in. I will now turn it over to Julia Doloff to kick off our Q&A session.
All right, thanks so much, Michelle, and great job. So I just want to give a very quick reminder to the folks listening in on how our Q&A session is going to go today. So please use the instructions shown on the slide. If you're watching via the CalEPA broadcast, please email your questions into the SLCP inbox. If you're using the GoToWebinar platform, please type your question into the question pane. Sarah and I will then unmute participants in the order that questions come in. Note that you will need to unmute yourself on your end when asked to by CalRecycle staff. And please remember to state your affiliation when asking your question. We will try and get to as many people as possible. And some CalRecycle staff may respond to some of the questions through the GoToWebinar platform, so please review those. For those watching via the broadcast, we will verbalize these questions and responses for you to hear as well. And again, today we're focusing on questions first and foremost related to the calculator tool. And if we do not get to your questions today, we will follow up with you at a later date. So with that, we will go over to our first question. Just give me one moment while I move over platforms. Okay, so apologies for the delay. The first question is going to come from Kristen. So Kristen, you can go ahead and unmute yourself to ask your question. Okay, so Kristen is not unmuting herself, so I will ask her question. Okay, so our procurement target is approximately 70 times what our landscaper can realistically use in our city park and open space. Giving the material away to residents for free is an option, but is unlikely to close the gap entirely. We've looked into purchasing electricity and gas derived from our organic materials, but our local utilities confirmed they don't have programs in place to meet this need. Has CalRecycle done any outreach to major utilities to help facilitate this option? What are the penalties if the city makes a good faith effort but falls short of the full procurement requirement?
Thank you for your question. Can everybody hear me still? Great. I'll answer just the first part of the question, and then I'll hand it off to Alan for the second part. But yes, so as Michelle touched on in the calculator, there's a variety of options jurisdictions can use to meet their procurement target. And as you noted here, looking into other products such as electricity is it sounds like it's a good path forward for you and your jurisdiction. We have met with a variety of utilities about this, and there's nothing precluding an arrangement to procure eligible electricity, but you should look at the direct service provider language in our regulations, as well as the record keeping requirements. I think that we're going to have a lot of content on our website soon that gives examples of this and some guidance on how to procure electricity, fuels, other energy products, and the relevant record keeping requirements. Michelle, do you have anything to add to that?
I think you covered it pretty well, Scott. Thank you. Yes, and just to emphasize, yeah, please do, stay in touch through the SLCP inbox, through the listserv. We are in development of future FAQs for the website and future resources for our webpage to help give further guidance on these examples. So thank you for your question.
And Kristen, thanks for your question. I'll take the latter half of your question in regards to the penalties regarding not meeting any factors. So the regulations do have outlined, and it's specifically in the regulations in section 18997.3 under lowercase d. It highlights how the calculations for the penalty would be calculated for the jurisdiction if they did not meet their targets. So that's specifically within there. In regards to your last statement there, so good faith effort is not utilized in the SB 1393 regulations. Although when determining the penalties, as it says in the regulations, there are factors within that particular section. Specifically in C, there are 7 factors in there that are taken into consideration, that the department utilized to take into consideration for determining the penalties that are determined for the jurisdiction. So I hope that answers your question. It's pretty specific and laid out within the regulations on that process.
If I could just add really quickly, Alan. So Kristen, one thing to note is that CalRecycle does recognize that there could be challenges within your jurisdiction. So we always want to work with you for compliance first and then go into enforcement. So penalties are, one of the last things that CalRecycle would do. So there is notice of violation, corrective action plan. So there is a lot of steps before the penalty phase just to reassure you that, if you're not making, if you're short in your procurement requirement, we're just not going to go straight to penalties. So I just want to make that clear. So we could talk more offline about your specific situation, but as Scott and Michelle mentioned, there will be examples coming up. And then as Alan mentioned, there are the penalties laid out, but there's a lot in between that. So just wanted to reemphasize that as well.
All right, so our next, oh, go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry, Julia. So our next question is from Jennifer Gilbert. Jennifer, you're self-muted. You can unmute and ask your question, please.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, you answered it in the chat, I think, for the most part. Sorry, this is Jennifer Gilbert with the City of Davis. I was specifically asking about how, in compost, it shows that you can either calculate it based on tonnage or based on cubic yards, and mulch is typically purchased and ordered and delivered via cubic yards instead of tons. So I'm just trying to figure out how we can figure out our mulch application since we have to report it in tons. And I don't know if we have to just weigh a cubic yard and see how much it weighs. Like, what is your recommendation? I understand that mulch can vary in density. I get that. So I'm just trying to think of how this would actually play out. If you can run some scenarios, I'm just really trying to wrap my head around this.
Definitely. Thanks for your question. We basically couldn't provide another cubic yards conversion in regulation for a variety of reasons. And so in the procurement tool itself, we also didn't provide that. I think that we're basically taking the tact of leaving it up to jurisdictions to propose something that's defensible or irrelevant to the mulch that they're purchasing, and it'll just be part of the records they keep to justify the reporting. And I wish we could be more helpful than that, but our mulch and organics experts seems to let us know that the mulch is such a wide variety of bulk densities that coming up with one factor didn't make sense. In future versions of the calculator tool, we could consider, having some sort of an input that you could provide your own conversion factor, and it would take that into account. But that's a kind of different added layer of complication that will need to be prioritized, probably lower than fixing things and adding other relevant helpful features.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, our next question is from Michelle Young. Michelle, you can go ahead and unmute yourself to ask your question.
Yeah, hi. I think it was a real simple question. I'm just interested in the tools that you were discussing, both the content. I think what was mentioned was that the tool CalRecycle is proposing could be used as a record keeping tool. So maybe a little bit more about that. And then also, I think the answer was that maybe it's coming out in the summer.
Yeah, hey, Michelle, great question. So yes, we are developing a sample electronic record keeping tool, and Alan could go into more of what it is entailing. But we do plan on releasing it hopefully July, August of this year. So just sign up for a listserv. I think you're already on it, but just sign up for a listserv. And once it's available and published, we will let folks know. And again, we'll be doing another webinar on that tool about a month later after the tool's released, kind of like what we did for procurement. Alan, I don't know if you want to go into more detail of what the tool is going to entail.
Yeah, mainly the tool, and thanks for the question, Michelle. Mainly if I had that correct, yeah. The tool is mainly just going to be covering to assist the jurisdictions so that they are meeting the requirements of the implementation record and record keeping requirements of SB 1383. Similar to how Michelle and the great job that she did in creating the calculator tool, we're going to be looking to follow that same blueprint to assist the jurisdictions to utilize the tool so they can meet the requirements. Again, it'll be an optional tool for jurisdictions to utilize, that they may choose to utilize or may choose to utilize another tool. But putting out there, and similar to what Ashley and echoing Ashley said, in the summer to put out there for jurisdictions to utilize. But more as that comes out, and more details, ensuring that you're on the listserv so you can stay up to date on upcoming events.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, our next question is from Carlos Chavez. Carlos, you can unmute yourself. Okay, so Carlos does not have a mic, so his question is, do you require procurement source such as company names, addresses, contacts, or is it sufficient for us to report quantities of materials?
Thanks so much for your question, Carlos. There is an important distinction I do want to make with your question, that there are record keeping requirements and then there are separate reporting requirements. So for record keeping, those requirements are outlined in the regulations in section 18993.2, and there are a variety of requirements for record keeping, which does include things such as the contact information, the name and physical location of entities from whom products are procured. So that will be required for the record keeping aspect of it. Regarding reporting, there is a much smaller range of requirements. The record keeping will be the bulk of the requirements for procurement, but for reporting, it will just be those quantities of products procured during the compliance year that will need to be reported to CalRecycle. The information of those entities from whom products were procured, those will just need to be kept in a jurisdiction's implementation record. And I did note in the presentation briefly, but if a jurisdiction is implementing that reduced procurement target, there will be some additional reporting requirements for that. But if you are using the official target calculated from CalRecycle, it will just be those quantities of products procured during the compliance year that needs to be reported.
All right, so our next question is from Vicky. Vicky, you can go ahead and unmute yourself to ask your question.
Hi, this is Vicky with the City of Modesto. And I just was curious, when we do our annual report, we report what goes to biomass from Modesto from our haulers and waste to energy. So in the reporting tool, will we be able to get credit for a portion of that towards our procurement? Did you hear me?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yes, definitely, I heard you. So the answer to this question, so this is, I think, to clarify, what we're talking about here for procurement is the procurement of the end products made from diverted organic waste.
Okay.
And so there's no reporting on what you send anywhere in particular for the reporting requirements that may come into play in other parts of 1383. But if your jurisdiction is buying products from said biomass facility, energy, electricity is an eligible product. If the biomass facility meets all the other requirements, then all the other requirements within regs come into play in terms of record keeping and reporting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we don't get credit if we send X amount to waste to energy, they create energy out of it. We don't get credit for that.
Correct.
We're not buying that energy. Is that correct?
You're not if you're not procuring that energy,
okay.
Then it's not relevant to the procurement requirement.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, next question is from Rosie Ledesma. Rosie, you're self-muted.
Hi, this is Rosie Ledesma with the City of Woodland. I was looking at the calculations for the ton of compost versus the cubic yard of compost, and I'm a little confused. So I'm assuming that for 1 ton of organic waste, it comes out to 0.58 tons of compost after it's processed, correct? But if you multiply that by the conversion factor to get a cubic yard, which is about 1.45, you should get about 0.87 or 8 something, or 0.4, because it's not actually 1 ton of compost. So am I reading that wrong, or is that a mistake?
Gosh, I hope it's not a mistake.
Thanks for your question, Rosie. I can try and take a stab at it, and maybe Scott, you can jump in. So those conversion factors, they are converting tons of organic waste in the jurisdiction's procurement targets into end quantities of products. So it would be 1 ton of organic waste is equal to the 1.45 cubic yards of compost, or that 1 ton of organic waste in the target can equal, I believe it's 0.58 tons of compost. So it's, I don't know if that clarifies it a little bit more.
And to go so yeah, it's a little bit weird, a little bit wonky, because we're basing the procurement target on the tons of organic waste that was used to make all these products. So again, it's 1.45 cubic yards of compost come out of 1 ton of organic waste that's used to make that compost. So you can't go between the 0.58 and the 1.45 mathematically. It doesn't make sense unless you go back to the end product. So it should be internally consistent. I don't know, we could run the number real quick on what conversion factor to go from the end product 1 ton of compost to 1 cubic yard of compost end product. But off the top of my head, I don't remember what assumption we made there.
Okay, yeah, because I think I understand the conversion from 1 ton of organic waste after it's processed would only be like half a ton of compost, but I don't understand why it would be 1.45 cubic yards after the process, because that's equivalent to 1 ton of finished compost. So what I'm saying is that the finished compost amount.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's a bit of a delay. I did not mean to talk over you.
Yeah, no, I think that the conversion might be a little bit off, because I mean, if it's only 0.58 tons of finished compost product, getting the cubic, kind of converting that to cubic yards should only be 0.84 cubic yards then.
Yeah, let's follow up with you after that. I don't have our background calculations handy for that, but I think let's explore that a little bit further offline.
Sure.
It's really helpful. Thank you.
And this is Julia. I'm not seeing any more questions right now in the question pane via the GoToWebinar platform. And I don't believe we have any questions in our SLCP inbox right now. So just a reminder to those of you participating, we are here until 3. So if you have questions, feel free to email us or type them into the questions pane. All right. So our next question is from Carlos. Carlos is asking, can one jurisdiction procure recovered organic waste products from other jurisdictions?
Great question, Carlos, and that's one we get quite often is, where do we have to source these from specific areas? Do they have to be from our own produced organic waste? Do they have to be from our own facilities? Things like that. And there are no limitations in the regulations for that. So a jurisdiction can certainly procure products produced in other jurisdictions, produced from other jurisdictions, organic waste. So there are those options and that flexibility. Thanks for your question.
Julia, Sarah is Sent you a question from SLCP.
Okay. All right. So this question is from David Briggs, the County of Napa. If a jurisdiction's franchised hauler / processor / provider is already collecting all 1383 defined organics and selling / diverting all resultant compost it produces every year, is the jurisdiction still required to make new purchases from other sources? Does the provider need to be under written contract to be considered acting on a jurisdiction's behalf?
Great question. And I'll go ahead and take a stab, and Scott, feel free to jump in and fill any holes I might have. So the requirements are for the jurisdiction, so for the city, county, or city and county to procure the product themselves. So an entity that's outside of the jurisdiction that's just producing and selling products, or that's using products that's not a part of the jurisdiction, that won't count for the jurisdiction's procurement unless there is a direct service provider relationship. So if the regulations do outline an option for cities and counties to have a written contract or agreement with direct service providers, with external entities to procure and use those products on behalf of the jurisdiction. So that, I think, answers hopefully part of your question. And let's see.
Just an FYI, I see that David Briggs is on the GoToWebinar, so I'm unmuting David. So you're now free to respond to Michelle and see if that answers the first part of the question. Okay, I'm not sure if David can hear us right now, but do you need the second part of the question, Michelle? Or are we good?
Let's see. I think, so regarding whether the provider needs to be under a written contract to be considered acting on the jurisdiction's behalf, yes, an external entity would need to have a direct service provider written agreement or contract with the city or county for them to procure on behalf of the jurisdiction. So is there anything I missed, Scott, you want to add in?
No, I think that's a good answer to that question.
Okay.
And Dave doesn't have a mic. I got that in the SLCP inbox just now. So hopefully, David, that answers your question. If not, you could email the SLCP inbox again.
Great. And I'd like to go back to Rosie's question. I found our documentation on the conversion factors, and I think it's right. We're pretty confident it's right. We assumed that 1 ton of compost is approximately 2.5 cubic yards. So that's built into the formulas and into the calculations themselves. So 1 ton of organic waste makes 0.58 tons of end product. That 0.58 tons of end product multiplied by 2.5 is 1.45 cubic yards. And so you can see the connection there mathematically, and the way we do the conversions is, it makes sense, but it's very wonky. It's very like a little inside baseball there, but we are assuming for the purposes of these conversions that it is 2.5 cubic yards per ton of compost.
Thank you for clarifying that.
And this is Julia again, just letting you know we don't have any questions from our end.
Great. Yeah, and as you start utilizing this tool and you have additional questions, please feel free to send them to the inbox. We've run just a massive amount of stress testing and tried to break this as much as we can, but if you do see any issues that hinder the use of this calculator, let us know as soon soon as you can, just in case we need to make a new revision. But we're really hoping that this is as tight as it can be. We've shared it with numerous jurisdictions, our Excel experts internally and externally, and consultants. So we're excited for this to really get utilized and to be helpful for the jurisdictions.
And one last plug, we do encourage you to join in for our regional webinars. Again, we will have one tomorrow from 1 to 4 p.m. We've called them regional webinars, but any folks from across the state, of course, can join any of the webinars. So tomorrow's will be from 1 to 4, and again, you can reach out to our SLCP inbox, which is on the screen for those links to register. So we hope to see you there.
So Dave has a question, SLCP, and I'll just read it. Please repeat the estimated date that the tool will be available. So the procurement calculator is currently available, and it is on our website, and we could send you the link if that's what you're asking about. For the record keeping model tool, that will be available sometime in July or August, as long as technology and ADA compliance agrees with us. And that, just sign up for a listserv and we will send out notices once that one's available. And again, like this one, we will be doing a webinar on the model record keeping tool once it is published. And just as a note, there is another message in SLCP, but it's mainly about last week's webinars. So we are working on making those ADA compliance along with this one once we're wrapped up. So we will be posting the recording of all of our webinars, as well as the PowerPoint with talking points for all of our webinars as well. But we do need to make those ADA compliant. So again, please sign up for our listserv, and that's what we'll notify you guys once all of our webinars are up on our website. I think there is a question back on procurement.
Yes, there is. So Ria, you can unmute yourself to ask your question. Okay, so I'll ask her question for her. Her question is, please clarify the process under which a jurisdiction's procurement target can be adjusted if the target exceeds the jurisdiction's total procurement of transportation fuel, electricity, and gas for heating applications from the previous calendar year.
Thanks for your question, Ria. So the procurement requirements, the intent with them was not to make jurisdictions procure more products than they can actually use. And so this was included in the regulations to potentially allow jurisdictions to lower their procurement targets if they can provide those records, and that would also be reported to CalRecycle, those records of the jurisdiction's previous year's procurement of transportation fuel, electricity, and gas used for heat. So their previous year's procurement and use of those products, if they report those quantities to CalRecycle, and it is using the conversion factors outlined in the regulations. So if their jurisdiction's previous use of transportation fuel, for example, converted into, using the conversion factors to kind of back calculate to what it would all add up to for those energy products to their target, for that value in tons of organic waste. If that value as kind of back calculated from their previous year's procurement is, if it exceeds their jurisdiction's procurement target that is calculated based off of the jurisdiction's population, then that can be used to support a lower procurement target, and it can be lowered to that previous year's procurement of the energy products as kind of back calculated to be a target. So hopefully that answers your question.
And next question is from Christina Hansen. Christina, if you wanted to unmute yourself and ask your question, please. Okay, so Christina's question is regarding target reduction. Previous use of fuels, etc., must have been from a biosource, though. Is that correct?
No, it's overall overall use of the energy products, and regardless of the type of product, the source of the products. So it's overall electricity, overall fuel use.
This is Julia, not seeing any further questions at this moment.
I'm not sure if people
Okay.
are typing or not. I don't want to like cut them off just in case they are. So let's just give it one more minute, Scott and Michelle, and then we could close this out if it's okay with you.
Great.
Again, like Michelle has been doing our plugs, there's a whole bunch of regionals coming up. I think there's 5 more, actually, now that I think about it. I believe there's 5 more. Again, you don't have to attend your region. We do have agendas posted. Procurement does have an hour-long session where you could ask more questions. Doesn't have to be about the calculator. Could be anything on procurement at that point in time. So they will be doing about a 10-15 minute recap of what the procurement regs actually say. And then the rest of that hour will be Q&A, so live Q&A like we're doing now. Also within the regionals, we do have collections, so Kara and Julia and that team, and we have edible food. Tomorrow, I believe Kara is gonna run that one, Kara and I, and then we'll have Martine Boswell and Kyle Pogue, I think, for the rest of the regionals for edible food. So those each have an hour-long session in the 3-hour session for the regionals. So please attend those if you can. It's always very interesting to hear what other regions come up with or other folks come up with. You don't always get the same question. We do have FAQs up as well on our webpage. That's where we're taking the most frequently asked questions. So things that we're hearing multiple times. Those are always going to be updated throughout 1383 and probably the life of 1383. And there's a whole bunch of other tools that we are developing. You heard briefly about record keeping. Eventually we'll be releasing what the waiver forms look like. Our Article 2 new technology process will be released within this year. And then we are also updating how jurisdictions will actually report to us. So there are some exciting things in the works. I keep rambling just to wait to see if anyone is going to type a question in.
I've got my guitar back there. I can play something.
Right? I know. It's like, Scott, you could jam out. I don't see any other questions. So let's wrap it up. I'll give you guys 2 minutes back of your time. So thank you guys so much. Scott, Michelle, great job. Alan, thank you for chiming in. Sarah and Julia, thank you so much for doing the Q&A, and hopefully we'll see some of you guys tomorrow. So have a great afternoon.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ashley.
Thank you so much.